Athens Classic Inc. was started and still is a nonprofit organization. Our mission statement is to support public health, public education, and public safety. Unfortunately, when we first formed, we spent the first 2 years on the public safety aspect of it. And from a public education, I'll get into this a little later, but I would say we have candidates here that we'll introduce shortly. But I think we have kind of let it slide, and we take full responsibility by not getting as involved in the Board of Education in the election process. So that's something that we want to put in the back of your minds, or in the front of your minds, if you will. But in our last meeting on January 25th, we actually just made the appeal. We said, you know, please, if anyone is called to step forward to run for a commissioner seat, would you please strongly consider that? And I know at least two of the candidates talked to a lot of people, and I know all three of them did, but I happened to get a call from two of them the morning of the last day of qualifying and said, I'm on the fence, but I think I'm going to go for it. And they did. So it is a pleasure for me to make the brief introduction, but I'm going to turn it over to the real moderator in just a second. But, you know, I don't want you to assume that you know who's running, so I want to make sure you do. District 2, we have incumbent Melissa Link versus Jason Jacobs. 4 is Allison Wright, unopposed. 6, Stephanie Maddox Johnson versus Rasheed Malcolm. 8, incumbent Carol Myers versus Mama Sid Waters. And 10, Mike Hamby, unopposed. And then we'll later introduce our district attorney candidate, Kalki Yalamanchili. But I will say on that, Ross, where are you?
Right here.
Ross actually has the sign-up list if you wish to sign up in endorsing Kalki over here. He has that list. So
we'll have the petition at the desk here if you want to sign it on the way out.
All right. We're pleased to welcome Tim Bryant. And I don't know if anybody in here doesn't know who Tim Bryant is. I listen to him every morning, and that's home, you know, on the way to work and so forth. But Tim is with WGAU, and I like to use the moniker that is stated. He didn't say this, but it said, Tim Bryant, Radio Hall of Fame and News Director for Cox Media. Please, Tim, I'm turning it over to you.
Here, somewhere in here, correct?
There you go.
All right.
And you know the candidates.
And we will call them up. Is there any particular batting order? I'll just grab whoever's first. It's up to me. First, let me say it is such a privilege to be in the company of such a distinguished group of radical extremists. I have heard and read you all described that way. That seems to be a nebulous term these days, and it kind of means whatever somebody wants it to be. A vast experience in radio. Started in 1988 in Bainbridge, Georgia. I've been in Athens, hard to imagine, since 1998, so more than a quarter of a century in Athens. I have a lot of experience. What I don't have is Dick Haynes' voice. I don't have those pipes. I wish I did. All right, the format, as I understand it, and this being the important event that it was, Steve Middlebrooks and I finally hooked up about 2 o'clock this afternoon to talk about what we were going to do tonight. I'm just going to speak to each of the 4 candidates that we have on hand in no particular order. I'm going to go ahead and tell Mr. Jacobs to join us first. We're going to talk for some length of time, 6, 7, 8 minutes, about what you would get in an average segment on my radio show. I'm going to ask questions. And then when I'm done with the 4 candidates, we're going to bring them all on this table together and allow you a period of time to pose questions. Everybody okay?
Yep.
All right, then let's go. Come on, have a seat. You and I will share the microphone. Just sit next to me.
Yes, sir.
Jason Jacobs, we had you on the radio program the other day. Running in District 2, Melissa Link is the incumbent. Toss you a softball first. Draw some distinctions between your view of how local government should operate and how you perceive her view on the same subject. What separates you politically from her?
Well, from my viewpoint, and I'm not a very political person, never really have been, but I fancy myself to be more practical, more rational, and in my opinion, a lot of the things I've heard her say have more to do with things outside of our purview as Athens-Clarke County Commissions, and I'd like to see a larger focus on what we can do here inside of Athens to help Athens be better. I've gone to her with a couple of different issues over the years. She used to be our commissioner for downtown, which I have a business downtown, and I just felt like my voice wasn't really being heard. So I thought I could affect a change. And at the same time, and talking to a lot of people, a lot of folks that live in my neighborhood, they feel the same way, that they're not being heard necessarily, or they're getting talked past.
Let me pick up on that point, because as I said, I've done this for a while, and I don't believe I've ever heard a candidate, especially a candidate who's not an incumbent. I mean, everyone I've ever heard running for whatever the office is, from county commission to school board to state rep to governor, every single one of them says the same thing. Voices are not being heard. Mm-hmm. I've always wondered if that really means they didn't agree with what I had to say. I heard what you said, I just didn't agree with it. You understand the distinction?
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. Yeah, I'm sure she did hear what I had to say, but the response was, well, we can't do that, or we can't do this, instead of, how can we work together to accomplish these goals that the constituents and our neighbors are talking about in town? How can we work together? What are the things and the tools in our toolbox that we can use to affect this change? And I've always felt like maybe some of her own personal agenda kind of took the forefront versus what the people in our neighborhood were talking about.
Okay, well, all right, go ahead and give us an example then. You approached Melissa Link about issue X, and you said your piece, she said hers. What might that issue have been?
One of the big ones for me, I got into this mostly with dealing with the homelessness downtown, and some of the effective solutions to dealing with that problem, in particular, making downtown a more welcoming place for patrons and people that work. We employ a lot of young ladies, and they don't feel comfortable downtown, so I talked about some panhandling. Oh, we can't do that, free speech, and then I looked into it. I saw that McDonough had passed a panhandling ordinance in their town and had worked out a way to figure that. And I think there's some ways that we can look at doing that, and then also getting help, proper help, and treating the underlying causes of homelessness, not necessarily the symptoms. Some more substance abuse and mental health services. I broke down the tent encampment that they tried to go with in Barber Street, and it broke down to be kind of, in my opinion, a big waste. About 52 tents, $2.2 million. It ended up being around $2,100 per tent per month. And I just thought there was a better way, and even offered some solutions. I'm not a person to bring up problems without having thought of a solution. And, offered the solution, different solutions for that issue, and to me it just fell on deaf ears. And I was told, oh, this is having great success, and I broke down what was measured in success, and I think the successes were about $150,000 per success with that money.
So, people have heard me say this. I mean, we got all that federal money. It was COVID money that rained down on Athens, and what we got were nicer tents than the homeless people initially had to begin with. You mentioned your status as a downtown business owner. I know you and I talked about this on the program the other day. There are those in the Athens business community, downtown or otherwise, who will speak of impediments, barriers to business success that are sometimes thrown up by the local government. What, if anything, has been your experience with that?
We've been fortunate so far. All of our build-out was done years ago. I haven't really run into much of that. We were outside of what was designated historic. I have talked, Taco Mama was one such business owner I spoke to about someone who was causing some problems around his area, and he expressed some discontent with how hard it was to get open, and then not feeling like he was getting the support from the city and making it a more welcoming place for his patrons. That was one such thing. But for the most part, we've been blessed in that it's been pretty seamless for us working with.
Go ahead and plug the business. Maybe not everybody knows.
Cheeky Peach, right next to Last Resort. So.
And it's clothing and such?
Yeah, women's clothing and apparel, yeah.
All right. Talk for another couple of moments here, Jason Jacobs. Talk about the campaign, your first time running for political office, running against an incumbent who, if nothing else, knows how to get elected. How do you unseat an incumbent in a town? And I can tell you, if you haven't figured this out already, the local media, much of it, will attempt to and succeed in identifying the candidate who's farthest left, and that's the candidate, even in a nonpartisan election, who's going to get 65% of the vote. You're not the candidate who's farthest left. How are you going to overcome that?
Well, it is going to be a challenge, but I think the biggest thing is starting a conversation. I'm trying to be an open book. I mean, I gave my phone number out on that segment, radio segment. I'm open to talk to anybody because I know what the things that I see in town, but I know that a lot of people see other things. I have a family of 3 kids. There's people in my district have no kids and have a different idea of what needs to be addressed, and I'm ready to listen and represent them to the commission, work with other commissioners on problems that they may be having in their districts as well. And coming up with some viable solutions, bouncing ideas off of one another. I think that's something that's really lost in Athens that I love so much about Athens, the diversity of thought and diversity of ideas. I have my solutions to certain things, but it's not the end all be all. I like to see people poke some holes in what I may see and or may think would work and point out the pitfalls so those can be addressed and we can accentuate the good and mitigate the bad. And I think that there's a lot of divisive rhetoric, and when we disagree, we're labeled a certain way or told we're an extremist, like you mentioned, which I was having a great conversation with somebody in the bank the other day, and she said, people will be mad seeing us talk together. I said, well, why? She said, well, because you've been labeled a MAGA extremist. I said, well, I'm no such thing. It really stinks. We were having a great conversation, and now I got a pit in my stomach thinking, I'm going to go talk to somebody and want to know their opinion, and they're going to be looking at me like I'm somebody I'm not. And I think that that open dialogue needs to come back if we want to really get to some good solutions, good practical solutions to the things that we all see that are going on that sometimes are kind of discounted. I hear, crime statistics are down, but frankly, I don't feel safer. So I don't know how that reconciles, and those are some of the things I want to be able to openly talk about without being attacked or called insensitive or uncompassionate. And I think that's been a big roadblock between myself and my neighbors. Now, the other side of that, my wife and I have been on opposite sides of so many different topics, news topics, current event topics, and we always have good discussions, respectful discussions with one another. We live in a very down-the-middle type of household. When we met, we were much further apart than we are now. 16 years ago, we were both 22. Our minds have changed quite a bit, both of our minds. So that's what I'm looking to bring is just a little bit more practical approach and rational approach and honest approach to some of the problems that we're all facing.
Best of luck to you. Stick around. We'll get you back up here with the others in a moment. Stephanie Alex Johnson, let's go ahead and hear from you. And while she's making her way up here, a quick story that some of you may know and probably most of you don't. It's a question I get. Why are 6 Athens radio stations in Oconee County? I mentioned that I came here because, we're out on 316, right? I came here in '98 and a couple of different facilities in Athens, one on Millage and another on Barnett Shoals, and the idea was to consolidate the stations into one facility, and the idea was to put it in Athens. And there's always, as you know, any kind of business, you deal with the county government, and sometimes that can be a difficult process. In our case, it was. I'll make a really long story short, and there are people who can tell it better because they were here when it was happening. I got here after most of it was done. But the punchline of the whole story, and again, with the radio station, 6 radio stations, a whole lot of technical stuff. Every one of those radio stations will need at some point a tower, a radio tower. It was the idea of the mayor at that time, and we're talking 1998, so we're talking Gwen O'Looney. And I love Gwen, and we all should. But this will give you some sense of where the local government was in terms of dealing with business then. We need a tower. How tall? 300 feet. Well, it's awfully tall. Yeah, but it's a necessity. We have to have a radio tower. True story, Gwen's response was, okay, you can have your tower. Can you paint it blue to blend in with the sky? That is why we are in Oconee County. If you know anything about radio towers, and quickly, a lot of our radio towers are 299 feet tall. Why? Because at 300 feet, you have to start lighting them. And so, but the idea of having a tower that is red and lighted and visible is what? To keep the planes from flying into them. So the idea that we would camouflage a radio tower, that was the business climate in 1998. I trust it's improved, but then again, I don't know. All right, that does not come out of your time, Stephanie Johnson. Stephanie Maddox Johnson, you were on my radio program a couple of days ago, and we had a fine exchange. I want to bring up something that didn't come up, and folks will want to know, and you're going to have to speak to this, I'm sure, at every turn. Your role as auditor in the Athens-Clarke County government came to a rather abrupt end. As much as you want to talk about that, tell us what happened and why.
Thank you.
Is that on?
Or it's dead, it's probably dead, so yeah, well, it's lighted up. It is dead. All right, we'll just shout, speak up.
Well, I will say that it's not fair. I didn't get a softball.
I'll give you some softball.
Okay.
But spend some time on that, because I know people know it's been,
Yes.
it was reported when it happened.
Yes.
And so tell us what happened from your perspective, as much as you can. There may be some things you don't want to talk about. But
Well, what I can say is that I worked in the internal auditor's office as the internal auditor for the county, and my contract was renewed 4 times, and 2 months after the 4th approval, I was terminated on a Friday night at 7 p.m. And that's all I can say.
And that's all you can say or will say?
Can say.
Okay.
I have an attorney.
This is in pending litigation, or at
Yes.
least potential. Okay, fair enough. Let me ask the question this way. What did you learn in that job? What experiences did you have in that job that you would bring to the role of being a county commissioner?
Wow, okay. There are many different things that I took away from that role, but it started with my position in the finance department. First, I learned about the budget from the finance department staff, and not only just the general fund, the budget, but all of the other funds that you never hear about, the enterprise funds, the special revenue funds, the SPLOST funds, the T-SPLOST funds. They're all separate and they're all accounted for. The courts have their own fund. I say all that to say that's where my knowledge began to grow, and monitoring different department spending and understanding the different things that departments needed. When I transitioned over to the auditor's office, it was from an operational viewpoint. So I had a considerable information about most of the departments within unified government. I think there were only 4 out of the 55 or 60 departments and courts that I had not been assigned to by that point, and that was 2014. But I had enough information about the operations to be effective and efficient in the Office of Operational Analysis. And most of the audits that were assigned to that office were from an operational or programmatic or fiscal standpoint.
You're on my program the other day, and my word, not yours, but you described yourself. What you do for fun, it sounds like, is sit around and pore over those kind of financial reports to the point where you become kind of wonkish in your knowledge of local government operations.
Well, let's just say that I can no longer get my car in the garage. Right?
True.
Yes. So I have multiple 8-inch binders of data. I really am a student of whatever I'm into. And in 2010, when I first began working for the unified government, I came from a corporate background. And so I had extensive experience with 3 different industries in corporate America, but not local government. And it was so different and such a hard transition that I became a student by default. I began watching meetings starting 2 years before I started. So I went back to 2008 and began watching meetings when Kathy Ward was on the board. So I started there and I watched a meeting every day from 2008 until 2014. And
it's my job and I don't do that.
It was quite interesting for someone who has no concept of what to expect and understand. I would come into work every day, Monday through Friday, and I would pull up the next meeting on my monitor on the right, and I would work on the left monitor all day. And I would listen, and sometimes I'd turn and watch, but it was eye-opening. You by default understand the patterns, the decision making, who's the boss, how they're jockeying for you do mine, I do yours. But maybe on purpose, maybe not so much on purpose. They're boutique projects, what I care about, what you care about, you by default, you learn those things. I know your color's purple, my color's blue. I'm usually late, I'm usually on Facebook, I'm usually, raising my hand with questions for the manager or for the mayor, and then I never say a word. I can tell you, I could go through each one for all of
And now you want to be a part of that. You want to be behind that rail and a part of that group. Why? Why on earth?
That's a great question. Him.
Yeah.
That's my husband. He works for the county too, but we grew up in Athens. And we are products of the Clarke County School District, and we have seen a lot change. And we've seen a lot, specifically District 6, not change. District 6 still looks like it did when I used to live across the street before the McDonald's at the Melwood, right across from Duncan's Jewelry. Before that McDonald's was built, my mother used to rent a home down that road. So it's 148 Melwood Drive, and I lived there. And Reverend Mosley was my bus driver. And that's how far and how connected things are. And when I say they're absent from a few car dealerships, and I think Target relocated to their location, not much has changed.
Well, it's about to with that mall redevelopment.
And I can't wait. I think we definitely need it, but it's not the only thing. We have shopping plazas that are empty, that have empty commercial space, and it's throughout, and it's been like that for years.
I think we're back in business now. And with that, I'm going to ask you to leave. No, seriously, a parting statement when we get you back up here to answer questions. What do you want people to know about your campaign?
Well, I am not running to be popular. As you suggested, why would I? Well, I feel compelled to run because I understand how the unified government works. I understand the fiscal aspect as well as the operational aspect. And I know that I am the most qualified candidate day one. I know that the experience that I've gained.
There it goes again.
There you go.
How was I doing projecting? Was it okay?
You're fine.
They say I don't project well.
Oh, you're fine.
But I am invested in this community because I grew up here. I'm one of the few people who can say from decade to decade to decade, maybe in 5-year increments, if not just decade, what has changed and what hasn't changed. But most importantly, I live in District 6, I talk to my neighbors, and I talk to businesses, and I have been talking to a lot of businesses since announcing in November. People aren't heard, people want to be engaged, they're not given the opportunity, people want to see industry, people want a park, people want green space, people want a phone call return, people want to hear from their commissioners before critical votes are made that affect them. And people are begging for transparency. That's why.
Good luck to you. Thank you. Sidney Ann Waters is here someplace. Sidney Ann Waters.
She's right.
Well, she needs to be here, is what I'm saying. And by the way, she mentioned to me, and y'all will probably hear this, it's important that for the purpose of this campaign that she be Sidney Ann Waters and not so much Mama Sid. Everybody knows Mama
Just
Sid.
Sidney Waters.
Sidney Waters. Everybody knows Mama Sid, but you can't put Mama Sid on a ballot, unfortunately. And so.
The election committee yesterday said I could not.
That you actually made a point of trying to get Mama Sid on the ballot?
I did. We had a meeting yesterday, and I was there to speak from the aspect of why I am Mama Sid. My son came, and he stood up in front of this group of people and said, I've never done this before, but I need to tell you how my mother is Mama Sid. He told his experience in middle school and how his friends called me Mama Sid because everybody called me Mama anyway, and they started calling my son Sean Sid, and so I became Mama Sid, and Jim became Papa Sid. And 4 years later, when we opened the store, they named the store. And so Willie Fambro yesterday commented, well, her business name is not Mama Sid, her business name is Mama Sid's Pizza. But I was quite surprised that 3 people came to speak against me putting my name on the ballot, and one of them was Carol Myers. And that, it sort of really surprised me. And, but the board voted 3-2 that I could not put Mama Sid on the ballot, even though all of them agreed, it's my name. It's who I am.
You were, when I got here in '98, you were on the school board. How long had you been on the school? How long were you on the school
I
board?
was on the school board. I was elected in '96 and served through 2008. 12 years.
So 12 years on the school board, out of local government all these years. I turned on the Fox News channel at 5 o'clock the other morning. There you are, running for the Athens-Clarke County Commission.
That's right.
Why jump back into these, pardon the pun here, why jump back into these waters?
I have always been an onlooker. I have not been involved with the city government. I have been an onlooker. And it was becoming very evident to me through discovering the revolution of 2019 and the 3 years that Kelly Gertz worked with the United States Department for us to become a refugee resettlement site, that the commission didn't really know what was going on either. And from my experience of being on the school board, on January the 6th of the year 2000, and we came to an agenda meeting, and the board went into executive session, and when we came out, 5 board members fired the superintendent, and 3 members had no idea. Myself, Vernon Payne, and David Nunley. And I knew then, okay, these 5 members had been cohorting somehow or another over Christmas break. And when they left, when they got there, one of them told Beverly Cox, the newspaper reporter, don't leave, it's going to get good. I heard from Tim Bryant the next day going, I didn't get told anything, so I went home. And so he did not know about it firsthand, but the 3 members petitioned the state attorney general to look into sunshine law and ethics. He in no way laid an ethics claim on those 5 board members, but he did send a 6-page report saying, I do not want to see your names on my desk ever again. That it was very evident that 5 members did discuss in some way or another. You can't say 10 feet were under the same table at any one time. And that's when I became really a rules member. If you have a rule, you have to abide by it. And when I woke up this morning and saw on Newsbreak and on Online Athens that our board at a board meeting maybe last month, when it came up about the short-term rentals, and they had already passed, what they were going to do with them. But then they came back with an amendment. And because Allison Wright had to recuse herself, the vote was 5-5. 5-5, 5-5 with 3 votes. Kelly Gertz said, we need to break for 15 minutes. They did not go into executive session. And so they broke, and about 25 minutes later, they came back to the board and they voted unanimously against the STRs. Today, several short-term rental people are suing the Clarke County Board of Commissioners because of ethics rules. It was very evident. They met upstairs, downstairs, somewhere in that meeting in those 25 minutes and came back, and the vote was unanimous. 5 people changed their vote. Now, to me, because of my experience with the school board, that sends up red flags to me all
What
the time.
can one commissioner do about that?
I don't know, but I can definitely raise my hand and say, did I miss the meeting? When guy that killed Lake and Riley. My first question is, who paid their rent?
Yeah.
Who paid their rent for this apartment? That's why I want to know, because these are the people bringing these people into Athens. I was told today that about 70% of our homeless are Athens people. The other 30% are brought in, and they said that Advantage Behavioral are the ones bringing them in. And I said, well, look at all the federal money they're getting. And they said, I guess you know the answer then.
Let me ask you, this is a hard question, it just occurs to me, and it's, I don't know how you'll react, I hope you'll answer. If Lake and Riley had not been murdered, if that had not happened, would you be in this race?
I had people who I highly respect to call me, several people, asking me to run.
Before?
No, this was actually the evening of March the 5th. And I said, okay. I mean, you know, I'm game. I feel like that I'm tough enough and ornery enough that I can answer anything.
I can stipulate to that. There's no area of disagreement there. Well, let you go on this one. What do you plan to do? I mean, this is not some primary. This is it. I mean, between now and May 21st. So not a lot of time here. What's the game plan?
Well, my game plan is to get enough signs out, enough flyers out, so that people know that Mama Sid is Sidney Waters. Because Carol Myers came to the Board of Election meeting yesterday to say I could not use my name, I assume that she's very scared of people knowing that Mama Sid is Sidney Waters.
Thank you so much. Kalki Yalamanchili, I think everybody knows him. I know he hopes everybody here does. We were talking earlier, the petition drive, your decision you could have avoided this. You could have qualified as a Democrat, you could have qualified as a Republican. You chose neither route. Now, I know what you're going to tell me, right? It's supposed to be a nonpartisan job and politics shouldn't matter. And the practicalities, though, are that this community is what it is. It's going to vote traditionally 65% for the Democrat candidate, and that's not going to be you. So how do you plan to, first of all, finish this petition drive? Sounds like you're on your way to getting what you're going to need there. More importantly, accomplishing what you need to between now and November.
Well, I mean, being honest about doing the work. You know, that's the one thing, you're right. It does add the added requirement that we get 5% of the folks who are eligible to vote for district attorney in the previous election cycle, which is 5,406 people, to sign a petition to have me on the ballot as an independent. What that means is we've built an incredible grassroots network. We have over 100 volunteers who have volunteered to circulate copies of the petition themselves. I was talking to somebody who's running a congressional primary. I told them that, and they told me, wow, how did you get 100 volunteers? And the answer to that question is that this community is tired of being divided for the personal benefit of some people on the issue of public safety. And there's a broad consensus of people that cross political aisles that want a district attorney's office that is equipped to accomplish its core duties and deliver justice for all in this community. So for me, you know, our plan is to get out there and do the work. You know, Monday I was at the candidate forum that you moderated. Yesterday we had an event. Today I'm here, and tomorrow I'll be at the Clarke County Democrats meeting. So we're going out, we're meeting people where they are. And I have the same message regardless of what
kind of response, you'll meet with those Democrats and then you can tell me about how that went. I'd be very interested in knowing. But you meet a lot of them. Obviously, you interact with a lot of them. A lot of the folks who voted for Deborah Gonzalez because they like what she was selling as a candidate, this notion of frankly being a woke DA that appeals to a lot of folks. What do they say now when you talk with them?
Well, I think there's a lot of recognition. I mean, obviously, no person who runs for political office for any position ever wins 100% of the vote that's out there. But there's
Putin just did, but that's
right, slightly different system, thankfully. So, you know, when I'm going out and I'm talking to people, they're seeing the failures of the office, but they also, when they sit down and they talk to me one-on-one, and my card has my cell phone number on it, I will sit down with any person, regardless of what their political leanings are, to have an honest conversation about what my vision is for the office. And my vision for the office is that when a victim comes in who's been the victim of a serious crime, we need to have trained prosecutors who are committed to doing the right thing the right way, regardless of whether anyone is watching, and who are capable of delivering justice for that victim. And we also need those same prosecutors with the experience to understand when we're looking at nonviolent crimes that are caused by someone with an underlying substance abuse or mental health issue, having the skill set to be able to connect those people with the resources that we have in our community so they can get back to living a healthy and productive life. They can go back to their families. And what we have right now is not just a failure to deliver justice for victims. We have a failure to use the accountability courts and other treatment resources that we have in our community to help those people that should have an opportunity.
what's the DA's role in that?
So the district attorney is actively involved in the accountability court process. When the previous DA was in office and I was working at the office, we had a prosecutor who was specifically assigned to the accountability courts as well as the pretrial diversion program. And that prosecutor's job is to take case files that have been handed off to them by other DAs in the office and determine whether or not that person would be a good candidate for drug court, would be a good candidate for the treatment and accountability court that treats mental health issues, will be a good candidate for the veterans court. And we're failing those people. Our drug court, only about half those positions are being filled right now. Our veterans court, only about half those positions are being filled right now. And when you talk to people around those programs who have committed their professional lives to helping folks who are having issues but want to get better, they'll tell you the impediment to that right now is our current district attorney's office, because we have a non-functioning DA's office that's not able to review case files and get people connected with those programs. Let me tell you one thing, and then we'll move on. I know I could talk about this stuff for hours. I know we don't have time for that, but I was at the Felony Drug Courts Memorial in December. They get together right across the street in the Veterans Plaza outside the courthouse. They talk about people that they've lost in the last year to substance abuse and mental health issues. And they were talking about an individual who had been arrested for a felony offense. The drug court had reviewed his case and said he's clinically eligible, meaning he needs our level of services. He wanted to go into the program. And the only holdup was they couldn't get a yes or no answer from the district attorney's office. And while that man was waiting, he succumbed to his health issues, he had a relapse, and he passed away. And so these are the types of failures that we're talking about, on top of the failures that make the news. And for me, that's the question that we have right now, is our bar for whether or not there's going to be a justice in the case, whether or not it gets enough public attention that the district attorney feels that there's some political liability there, so she's going to bring in an outside prosecutor or pay attention to that case. That's not what justice for all means, and that's right now what we're suffering from in this community.
Yeah, the question I was going to ask, and we'll let this be the last one, and then we get everybody back up here. Much of what you just described, I didn't get an answer from the DA. They're not dealing with this accountability court, diversion court thing. That sounds like a byproduct of the staffing issues we've heard so much about. So by way of just data points, how many people, as you understand it, how many folks they have down there now, how many should they have?
So currently, there are supposed to be 17 assistant district attorneys plus the elected DA. It used to be 18, but the current district attorney turned one of those positions into a public relations person. So we'll go with 17, okay? There are 3 licensed attorneys out of 17 positions currently at the district attorney's office, which is a staffing level that makes that office incapable of functioning.
Well, and add to that a district attorney who is herself not, to this point, demonstrating any capacity for herself prosecuting crimes, to the point where you bring in outside the prosecuting counsel and different folks coming in from the outside to prosecute these cases. I make this point often, and she and I have prosecuted successfully the same number of cases. And I never went to law school. I'm not a DA. So do with that what you will. How do you fix that?
Yeah, so I mean, frankly, that is the initial monumental lift of getting in and fixing the office, is restaffing the office. And this is not coming from a place of being presumptuous about winning this election. We got a ton of work left to do to get on the ballot, and then we got a ton of work left to do to get the change that we need in this community, in Clarke County and in Oconee County. But I've already started reaching out to people who previously worked in the district attorney's office, live in this circuit, and prosecute in other circuits now, people who are prosecutors in other circuits and are interested in living in Athens or working in Athens. And frankly, people that she's reached out to about working for her who said no to her, I've taken them out to lunch, taken them out to coffee, breakfast, and I've told them, I'm not asking you for a commitment right now, but what I want you to do is I want you to start thinking about this. I want you to talk to your family about it. I want you to consider it, because I'm interested in having you come work in my office once I win this election. And we can build a core group of 6 to 8 people to come in within the first few months. You have to stabilize the office. You have to be able to put good, experienced prosecutors on the most serious cases that are coming up on the trial calendar. And once we do that, we've seen the population growth in this county, especially since 2020 and the pandemic. People want to come here. They want to live here. They want to work here. We have a top 20 law school 2 blocks from the Clarke County Courthouse, where none of their interns work at the district attorney's office anymore. And you have this situation where this community is a great place to live and work, and the failure is about leadership. It is not about pay. People have left without jobs lined up. People have left for less money. People have left for lateral salaries that they have to go and travel to get to the office to do. We can rebuild the office once we develop a culture that says, hey, this is a place populated by good trial attorneys who are willing to mentor younger attorneys and who are committed to doing this job the right way, regardless of whether anyone is watching.
Keep your seat. Let's get the others back up here. Sidney. I'll just slide in wherever. And I guess what we'll do is throw this open to you folks. Any questions that you may have? It's 6:15. Give me some guidance on how much longer we want to go. As long as you're asking questions and Steve says it's okay, we'll stick with it here. Direct the question, and we'll start with you in the back with the water bottle there.
Sure.
And direct the question to whoever you want us to direct it to, and then have it.
Sure, Ryan Brinson. Question about those 17 positions. I know there's some friction and some reasons why some of those positions are filled. Is there enough funding there currently to fill enough of those positions to get us back on our feet? So, in other words, is funding an issue or not?
No, funding is not an issue, is the short answer. These are 17 positions that were fully funded at the county pay scale for those positions, and some of them are actually state-funded positions. So what some people don't understand is the funding for a district attorney's office is split between the state of Georgia and then the county. And so there's a certain number of positions that fall on a state pay scale, and typically those positions pay more once you get up to a certain experience level. And then there's a certain number of positions that are funded on the county's pay scale. But there's no issue where those positions, can't be filled because there's not funding to fill them. It's simply a question of finding people who are willing to work in the office.
Someone else? Yes, sir, you here.
Officer, do you have any recourse to have your name as Mama Sid on the ballot?
They decided yesterday, 3-2, no.
But I understand, do you have any recourse to that?
I don't think so. Because the ballots will be printed fairly soon.
Yes, sir.
Jason, I was in a meeting last week and met you for the first time, and I was impressed with your educational background being in mathematics. How do you think that will help you to fully understand and equate and govern and make decisions better?
Well, the math degree I got from Georgia, it's not like the one you get from Tech where it's more concrete math, it's more theoretical. So you're breaking down a lot of proofs and working through problems forward and backwards. So I feel like it taught me how to think about something and break it down in a very rational, logical way with steps and filling in the blanks of possible pitfalls. I think that's something that's missing. It's oh, this is a great idea, let's just do it. And it's like, well, what kind of downside is there? And again, looking at that, seeing the negative aspects of that, and then trying to mitigate those while accentuating the actual, positive things that the plan in place is supposed to achieve. I think that would be kind of my way of solving any problem. I do it in business all the time. That's what we've been doing for the last 13 years. You look at a problem and you attack it a certain way and come to a pretty well-defined solution that you can see. It's not just, one of the questions I asked at the homeless, when they were talking about the strategic plan to reduce and prevent homelessness, was what does it look like after this $5 million is spent? And there really wasn't an answer. And to me, that seems like a lot of money to not have a clear, defined, expectation or result.
I'll be honest with you, I didn't hear anything after the part about different kinds of math.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Completely checked out after that. John Padgett.
Jason, if it'll help you with your life at home, I'll be glad to loan you one of my MAGA hats. Mom said, it's wonderful to have a 50-year-old running for county commissioner.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Stephanie, I'm talking to Trump tomorrow. I'm going to mention your name as a possible vice president. Kalki, I'm almost 80. I got more political miles behind me than probably anybody in the room. I haven't sat at a table collecting signatures for anybody for 10 or 12 years, but I've done it for you 3 or 4 times. Sure. God bless you. Clean this dadgum mess up.
Yeah. Please. Yeah.
I would love to let you answer the question. It's my understanding that the University of Georgia and the City of Athens have a terrible relationship. The two top dogs won't even talk to each other. And that is such an economic, dynamic force that we need to be working together. What can we do to improve that relationship?
Let's let certainly the 3 county commission candidates feel that one. Stephanie Johnson, town and gown.
Very, very good question. I wish I knew the answer myself, but I witnessed exactly what you're speaking about. I saw it for myself where someone would come across the street, college, and walk to City Hall to speak to the county manager, and the appointment, the person would not be received. Through the discussions in the budget division, in the finance department, there were many different dynamics of the two needing the same funding. The transit department is the major one, because the citizens of Athens ride the buses on campus, and the students ride the buses in our community. So there's a joint relationship that's needed. But I've literally seen the county wait for years on a reimbursement check because they wouldn't talk to each other. So I can't explain why that is, what that's about, except for maybe ego. And that's just I don't know anything else.
Kind of in the same vein, Sidney, and I don't remember if you were on the school board at this time or not. It seems like maybe you were. I hadn't been here long. But there was a joint meeting between the school board and the Athens-Clarke County Commission, and I attended, and I noticed that commissioners and school board members were introducing themselves to one another. I said, this town ain't that big. How do you folks not know each other? But they didn't, and it sounds as though you got the same issue with the University of Georgia.
This is true. When my first job as a school board member at a January agenda meeting that I went into was to create a vote on March 18th for the first school spielost. And because in November, the state approved, the vote approved for each jurisdiction to have a spielost. And we jumped in it right away, and I had a good friend who was an assistant superintendent at another system to tell me, don't think about the money. You won't ever be able to comprehend the money. Just look at what the purpose is. And I said, okay, this purpose is to bring in $87 million to build a new Cedar Shoals, renovate Clarke Central. And when it passed, and when we went in to renovate Clarke Central, we had to tear up all the terracotta pipes around Clarke Central because of the stormwater. And so we petitioned the commission to help us with the cost, because all this rainwater was coming off the streets. It was not coming off of Clark Central land. And they said, yes, we'll go in half. And when we walked out of that meeting, I looked at John Burke, who was the assistant superintendent at that time, and they agreed, and I said, you know, I believe we should have had that agreement written in blood. And sure enough, we sure should have, because the county did not come back to pay their portion of the several $1 million that it took out of the funding to replace those pipes. So yes, now, and at the Rotary Club, either Monday or yesterday, it was said, I guess Kelly Burks was at the meeting, that he's given millions to the Board of Education. And I'm sitting back going, is this something the commission knows? Is that something they need to vote on? Or is he just giving money, millions, to the Board of Education? And why is he doing that? And so I have questions. Okay, does the commission really know? There's just a lack of honesty to the people for them spending our money.
Jason Jacobs, that relationship was initially supposed to be a question about the difference or the divisions between local government and the University of Georgia. What observations might you have there?
I can't speak to as well, but I've heard the same thing, and it just doesn't make sense. There's so many resources. It should be a more symbiotic relationship. Not going to agree on everything all at once, but you got to sit down. You're not speaking to one another. There's no way to solve a problem. So any sort of differences should really be fleshed out in a good, clear, and concise way, in my opinion.
In the back.
Yeah, hey, John Morris, I work at Advantage. I'm really glad to hear and listen from y'all. Mama said, I know you mentioned our agency.
Yes.
I'd love to invite you to come look behind the curtain, and really anyone, if you want to see what we got going on, what our programs look like, who we're serving, all those things with the federal grants that we get. I'm going to leave my card with Ms. Joan at the table, so I'd love to connect and get coffee and talk about it. But my question was actually for Jason. I really appreciate your perspective. You're a guy we've gotten to know the last year or so in a lot of these homelessness conversations. Clearly are a very rational thinker, math-minded, data-minded. I feel like we had some really great conversations. I know you said you like having someone who pushes your ideas to make you think differently. I'm the same way, and I think that you pushed me in those ways too, which I really have appreciated. I just wanted to ask what was your reasoning for stepping down from the Athens Homeless Coalition Board in the past couple weeks? Because I do think that you had a really awesome perspective on that board, and I think that the Homeless Coalition is really missing your perspective, having said that.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think the Homeless Coalition is going to do some real good. I do think bringing all those organizations together, and I learned so much in being in those areas, because I feel like there's a lot that needs to get come together informationally, and I think there's a lot of great ideas, a lot of people that work there that are on the ground and know some real good solutions. My big thing was with the low barrier shelter and that plan. I always kind of had a problem with that, and I was hoping that being on that board I could convince otherwise the low barrier shelter being about $2.2 million for a low barrier shelter, low barrier meaning no requirement for sobriety and no criminal background checks. And those two things didn't sit right with me. And that was one of my main reasons. I thought I could affect change, but when everything happened and the response to our city, I just didn't see that happening. Going back to not being heard too many times, we'll take that into consideration. It seemed like the decision was already made. And for me, it was a decision. I didn't want to be a part of something that might bring somebody into Athens that would hurt someone else. Again, I employ 25 at any time, part-time employees, young ladies in college. I've heard their fears, and when that happened, that situation with Lake and Riley, we heard about it through the pipeline of sorority girls that work for us. And so my first thought initially was that it might have been a homeless person that had committed that crime. And that's been a fear that I've expressed back to Nancy Dentz in 2015. So being a part of that, it just didn't sit well with me, and I thought I could maybe affect change in a different way. Because I didn't see that as something that was going away and something that would be addressed. And again, not only to our community, but to those going to that shelter that were trying to stay sober and trying to stay clean. I didn't think it was safe for them to not know who was around them, or to have people coming in that may be under the influence and trigger them to maybe relapse as well, if that makes sense. And that was a really tough decision for me.
And I'll just say that, I mean, the Homeless Coalition Board did get to review those RFPs, and they were on the committee that reviewed those RFPs, so I wish you could have gotten a chance to, you had a chance to be at the table.
I hope I have a chance to affect it on this side of things, because I think that could be the big effect, is the person that gets that RFP and gets to vote on it, because I would support those changes.
All right, young lady in the back.
So this one's for Mr., is it Kalki or Kalki?
It's Kalki.
Kalki,
Yeah.
okay. So, and I had to write this down, I have two, but I'm just gonna ask one. So without filling the empty positions, the current DA went before the mayor and commission and asked for funding to support a position to, just address the gangs in Clarke County. As you may know, we do have an increase in gangs and gun violence in our community. How would you, as a DA, help our community address the problem without using the word prosecute?
Oh, wow. I think one thing Steve mentioned in his initial statements was, we've been focused on public safety. What about our focus on public education? To me, those things are not separated. An effective education system is part of giving young people hope in relationships that will keep them out of peer groups, that will lead them into making decisions to join gangs and unfortunately commit horrific acts like this community suffered from in the last few weeks with the killing of the murder of Kyron Zarko. It's something that I've talked with Pastor Mosley about the fact that the district attorney's involvement a lot of times when we get down the line in these situations has to come from a public safety response perspective rather from a perspective of how do we pour into these young people. And one of the things that we talked about, and I've talked with several other pastors in the community about, is that when we have these young people who are maybe coming into their first contact with the criminal justice system, committing nonviolent offenses, it's not enough for us to just say, we just want you to stay out of trouble for the next period of time, and then, that's it. We need to partner, especially with people in the African American faith community, but also with community partners and stakeholders throughout the community to give those kids relationships and social capital that is inside their own community, so that when they don't have the resources available to them or the supervision of the court system, then they have a place to go when those same peer groups reach out and they're not going to fall back into them to say, no, I have this relationship for this program that I went through. I'm going to go to those people. And right now what I'm seeing is what I've called in just conversations with people, press release partnerships. We have this partnership, we have this program, but they're not fully developed relationships. There's no staff member that I'm aware of. I'm committed to creating, once we restaff the office, a paralegal level position whose job is to coordinate with community stakeholders to manage those relationships so that we can find people who are going down a path and hopefully turn them back to a better path so that they can be contributing members to their community.
And after you do all that, then you prosecute, right?
I'm not allowed to say. Next question, I can use that word.
Yes, ma'am.
So, born and raised in Athens, also, if I were to wrap up what the people I talk to in Athens, Athenians, say, there seems to be no interest in representing the majority of the people. I'll give you 3 examples. Bikes over cars. We pay the ad valorem taxes, we buy gas, that's tax, we buy cars, that's tax. UGA traffic alone on Prince Avenue is insane. This is nuts. And I'm old enough, and Mama said it's probably old enough to remember, those ramp sidewalks were for bikes in the 70s. They were not for wheelchairs or pedestrians. So in my mind, we've already paid for that once, and now we're being asked to pay for it again. But they don't care. They've got their agenda, and none of them have been to Europe, but they point to, and I have, and they point to Europe, and I explain to them the difference, which I won't take here. The second is homelessness over citizens who are the tax-paying majority. This is a tone-deaf thing. I'm not saying that they aren't homeless. We've always had homeless, but they were not front and center to the endangerment of the law-abiding people. And that is a problem that nobody seems to answer. The last one may seem controversial to y'all, but it's history. The War Between the States Monument was actually a gravestone to the men of Athens who defended this town to defend blacks who were left here, children, the elderly, and it was removed. Now, my daughter happens to be a War Between the States historian. She talked to Kelly Gertz. He told her that he knew the law. The Sons of the Confederate Veterans had looked at the memorial. It was not in danger, which is all why I allowed them to move it. It had to be moved to an equally prominent and accessible place. It is not, as to downtown Athens. And do you know that it cost us $1 million to move a thing that the University of Georgia students were having a hissy fit about, but the townspeople didn't want moved? Gertz told my daughter, I know what the law says. I have tasked the city attorney to find a way to move it. So he didn't care what the Athenians said, and he told her the UGA students were upset about it, and she said, sir, they have a president, and you're not it. You were hired to represent Athenians, and you're not. So, one last thing, and that is the Judeo-Christian foundation of our country. Whether you know it or not, one of the first items of business for the very first Congress was to take public funds to buy hymnals for a part of the country. So, none of these that I have mentioned, or any of the majority of the people who are church members, God-fearing, and this is our history, feel like we are being represented of the crowd I talked to, and this is 60 and older, 50, 60, 70,
I don't know, because we're running short on time here. Can we get to a question?
Of these things where the majority is not represented, and these were my examples, how can you, on the commission, take on the rest who are not like-minded and maybe change things in this?
All right, everybody briefly starting with Stephanie on that. Yeah, I know, a lot of calories in there.
Well, I think being open-minded and pragmatic, just starting right there and being reasonable. Everybody's not going to agree with me, and I might not agree with everyone else, but I think the spirit of compromise is important to me, and I hope it is to my colleagues. With issues that
we've been compromised by them, and they refuse to compromise with us.
Well, I could say this definitively. I won't be a rubber stamp. I won't be a rubber stamp for anybody. I lost my job because I wasn't a rubber stamp. A job that I loved. So when it comes to speaking up and being faithful to what I believe to be the right thing for the many and not the few, I will do it again. I believe in speaking for the many. It's the betterment of all mankind, my mom would always tell me. It's to work in that spirit.
Mama said.
People have asked me, what do you plan to do? I'm only one vote, but I'm one vote that hopefully can throw enough sand in the crawl that I can become dang irritating. If we can get the three of us elected, I believe we have 4 members on the board who are moderate to that they will listen. If we get us on the board, Kelly Gertz is really going to switch.
Likewise, I'm not a rubber stamp. I've always thought for myself, and to me, there's more pressing issues that I like. That's what's getting me with the bike lanes, for example. Okay, how about drainage in the inner East Athens? They're having trouble with some basic infrastructure issues that I feel like we should look at first. At the time they moved that monument, I remember just being like, there's a lot of things. There was a pandemic, I believe. And, we were struggling as a business, and I was, worried about staying afloat. I didn't know it cost that much money. And similar with the bathroom they put in, just the wasted funds just to kind of go along with it. Something I was door knocking, one of my neighbors was like, it just seems like there's always an agenda. And I think that word kind of stuck out. I don't have an agenda other than representing my district to the best of my ability and ultimately working, inside of Athens problems with the, good local solutions too. I'm kind of tired of outsourcing a lot of, our research and solutions to people that aren't here.
Last question, cowboy hat there. And after this, by the way, we're going to wrap this up. And I think Steve will have a few items of business. But beyond that, I would say this. I would imagine that every one of these folks be happy to talk with anybody who didn't get to pose a question. So grab them before they get out of here. Yes, sir.
Okay, my question is for all the commissioners. and it only requires a yes or no answer. If you are elected and win, you're now in there, will you put forth a vote to repeal, rescind, reverse Mayor Gert's 2019 resolution and 2022 backroom deal to make Athens a refugee resettlement area? Yes or no?
Yes or no? Jake?
You mean what was the
Sanctuary
sanctuary
city.
city? I don't believe we should be a sanctuary city, absolutely not. So anything backdoor, I've kind of learned about some of the stuff Mama said with I had never heard of that, but like I think
Will you push for a vote to repeal, rescind, reverse his 2019 resolution and 2020?
Yeah, I don't think that's good for Athens. No, I don't think that's good for Athens.
Sidney Waters?
Yes.
Yes, you would do such a thing. Stephanie Johnson?
Yes, I don't believe that the commissioners should be held accountable to one person's decision.
Yeah.
Round of applause for these folks.